start the go live. Okay, so welcome to Parsha Pearls for Parsha's Ki Tetsei. Why is my face only half? Rotate your phone. Why is it? Oh. No, it's only giving me half my face. Okay, I'm not sure why that is. Why the bottom bit won't work.
I'm going to put these back in the folder.
Okay. As if I do this. Okay. Right, so this week is Parsha's Ki Tetsei. But before I do that, we wanted to share something that I saw. I like to share inspirational things when I see them. So this is the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, which is a Pirkei, was written by Rabbi Eliezer Haggadah, the great Rabbi Eliezer, the Rabbi Eliezer, that we talk about in Pirkei Avos, one of the Talmidim, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. If half the whole world was on one side and Rabbi Eliezer was on the other side, he would outweigh everybody. The famous Rabbi Eliezer in the Gemara, that was a Talmud of Beis Shammai, and a lot of fascinating stories about him. So the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, most people will call the forerunner to the Zohar, the Kabbalah. This was like the big Kabbalistic book that people would learn before the Zohar came about. So there's a lot of Kabbalistic ideas in it, and so on. But I was just reading in his thing about Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and he said something that really struck me. So we're talking about now, this is on Yom Kippur, where Hashem is forgiving the Jewish people, right? Salachti kidvarecha, I've forgiven you. And Moshe Rabbeinu is about to take down the second set of luchos. But he just says some throwaway remarks that really struck me, where he said like this, where he says, right, Moshe and Hashem had the whole debate backwards and forwards, the Yud Gimel Midos, can I see your face? Hashem said no, took him to the rock. And then he says, Amar Moshe Lefanov. So Moshe said to Hashem, Slachna l'avonosem shel Yisrael al naseh egel. Forgive the Jews for serving the golden calf. Ve'ilu Amar Moshe. And if Moshe had said in that moment, Salachna l'avonosehem shel Yisrael ad sov kol hadoros. Forgive all the sins for the Jewish people from now for all generations now. Haya HaKadosh Baruch Hu Osakein. Hashem would have done it there and then. Why? If he shahoisa sha'as ratzon, because that time was a great time of will and mercy before Hashem. V'chein ho'em, as it says in the pasuk, v'eis ratzon anisicha, I'll answer you at a time of great ratzon. Ela Omar, he chose to say, Salachna l'avonosem shel Yisrael al maseh egel. He missed the opportunity. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, Harei kidvarcha asit. I'll do exactly what you say. Shenema v'yom Hashem salachti kidvarecha. Hashem said, I will forgive them kidvarecha, like you say. I was prepared to do more, and I will forgive them. So a few things that really stuck out to me from this. Number one is the amazing power that Yom Kippur and the Eis Rotzon can have, right? What it means, Hashem would have forgiven all the sins for the end of the generations. I'm not quite sure exactly what that means, but that's the first thing I take about. And the second thing I take about is, it's a lesson for all of us coming to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. We think about things we want to ask for, things we want to daven in our own lives, family situations, the world situation. And sometimes we think, no, was a God listening to me? Well, I'm not going to ask for so much, right? You know, I had a debate with somebody last year. I said, yes, I do ask on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur to win the lottery. I do ask, right? So he said, how can you daven to win the lottery? I said, you win the lottery, what does he care? And then you see something like this. And what did Hashem say to Moshe? If you would have asked me to forgive the sins, the whole generations, I would have done. But you didn't. You did not. Now, I'm not saying that this is a criticism of Moshe Rabbeinu. It's just the facts. And Hashem says, okay, Hari kidvarcha asisi. I'll do exactly what you say. You ask for this, I'll give you this. You would have asked for more, would have given you more. It's a lesson coming to Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur that we can ask. This is the time to ask for things, to really, there's no limits. Doesn't mean Hashem will answer you necessarily with everything, but you see from here that Hashem said, if you would have asked, this was the time. We don't know if it will be a Shas Rotzon for everything. This is the Shas Rotzon. This was on Yom Kippur. This is the time to ask me for anything that you can ask, and so on. And you see that as an example. There's a story. I was reading a book about fundraising, Rabbi's book on fundraising. Somebody gave me a book written by Rabbi, I can't remember his name. Anyway, I gave him back the book, so I don't have it anymore. And there he gave a story where he went to somebody's office and he asked them for money. And the fellow said, how much money do you want? The guy said, I want to ask for $5,000. The guy said, $5,000? That's it? Okay, I'll give you $5,000. If you'd have asked me for $50,000, I would have given you $50,000. So the guy said straight away, okay, can I have $50,000? He goes, no. You asked for $5, I'm giving you $5. He wouldn't give it, but he said, if you would have asked me, so the guy said that gave a huge lesson on him. So next time he went in, he knew, he said the next year he went back and he asked for more and he got a lot more. But again, in that story, the guy didn't say, I was going to give you 50, so here, I'll give you 50. No, you didn't ask me for 5. I'll give you. You asked for 5, I'll give you 5. You'd have asked for more, I'll give you more. So that's the same thing here.
You heard that the night before.
Right, yeah. That, this is the time to ask. And I say to people on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, I say to people that it's so real. We don't even realize how real it is. And the whole thing's for the year. And I gave an example, and a sad example, right? We had October the 7th, which happened on Simchas Torah, where so many people were killed on that day. So many people obviously then went to war and the whole lives were turned upside down, right? When was all that decided? That was all decided on Rosh Hashanah, right? We don't know what good, bad, all these sort of things. It's all on Rosh Hashanah. And I saw also the other week that, I'm not going to get the Gemara now, but the Gemara says if somebody learns Torah all the time and he's really diligent about learning Torah, he doesn't have to daven. Right? Because learning Torah is a mitzvah mid'oraisa. And it says, who is that such a person? The Gemara says, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who wrote the Zohar, was in the cave for 12 years, and then the 13th year, right? He learned Torah so much, he didn't daven. But yet the Gemara says he would daven once a year. When was that once a year he would daven? Rosh Hashanah, right? The reason is why. Because the Gemara says, even though you're learning, you don't have to daven. It said, but if there's an eis tzara, if there is a dangerous time, then you have to. And the reason is because some people say davening is only a rabbanon, but if you have an eis tzara, you have something to daven for, something pressing, then you have a mitzvah in Torah to daven, right? So when is the eis tzara? When is a time of distress that you need to daven? On Rosh Hashanah. Why? Because everything is being decided on Rosh Hashanah. Remember, you and my Gemara share on Shabbos, right? And the Gemara is talking about, can individual people and Rashi said, what does it mean? Can you get rain in your merit? Said Rashi that if the year has been decided on Rosh Hashanah not to have rain, but you need rain for your trees, that won't work. You cannot overturn the decree of Rosh Hashanah. But if a lot of people, a rabbin, come together and daven, they can overturn. So you see the power of Rosh Hashanah, that things are decided. It's a real, and you can ask for things. So I said, yeah, okay. I did win the lottery 3 times this year. I won $15 once, $10 and $2. Right? I came home and said, I won the lottery. Oh, you won the lottery? Yeah, $15. Okay. Well, actually, the $15 was a scratch card I did with Daniel. He was so happy. So yeah, I won the lottery. Okay. I'll be specific this time. I want to win the $1 billion tonight. Or $1.3 billion, right? You can have a nice, beautiful shul. You can build a huge shul and a school. Somebody asked me to build a school. When he heard I started the shul, he said, oh, so you're having a place for a school because people want schools. But anyway, I said, no. And then they tried to come in here and it was not big enough. But so, there's so much looking for. So, that is the time for davening. Even things that people think are too far-fetched, it's not going to happen, doesn't matter. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, the 10 days, this is the time to daven. This is the time to get it. So I wanted to share that with you, a bit of inspiration coming up to Rosh Hashanah, to Slichos, the time that this year is the longest Slichos possible for Ashkenazim, because Rosh Hashanah is on a Tuesday. So we start already, not this Shabbos, next Motzi Shabbos. So we have 7 weekdays of Slichas and Erev Rosh Hashanah. It's the longest Slichas for 21 years till Shabbos, till Pesach is next on a Sunday, and Rosh Hashanah is next on a Tuesday. So it's a long Slichas.
A long time away.
Yes, it's a long time away, yes. Oh, I was telling that to the guy in Glicks, and he was laughing at me, because he gets up now. I said, are you getting grumpy yet? Right, because he has to get up an hour earlier because of the slichos, and he runs the minyan. He's the gabbai there, so he has to get up even earlier, take the books. I said, so are you getting grumpier yet? He's a little bit. So that's a little bit of inspiration when it comes to slichos. It's so real, right? It can have such, it's real. And when people say to me about how do you know God exists, how can you prove God exists? And there's so many proofs. I didn't get involved in any of those proofs. I say, how I know God exists? Because I can feel it. I can't necessarily feel it now. I can't necessarily feel it on a regular basis. But when I feel it? Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. Right? People feel something, okay? That's something that calls out to their neshamas. That's Yom Kippur, you're people who don't keep, not observant. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, they're there, they're in shul. It's something in the neshama's call out. You feel at the end of Yom Kippur, you feel something in your body. You feel extra something. What is that? That's godliness. And when people say, "How do you know Hashem exists?" I say, because I felt it. I don't say I felt God or whatever, because people think you're crazy. But we've all felt something, right? You feel that extra dose of something, like the thing we can't describe at the end of Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah when you blow the shofar. As I say to people, when you blow the shofar, when you put the shofar to your lips in a shul on Rosh Hashanah, right? You feel things. You get a dread. You get it's not about nerves, about blowing the shofar. You feel something. You feel the awesome, right? Like a Baltakeh, you can experience that. You feel the awesome power of it, and that's how I say to people, I know God exists because I feel it, right? If there's no God, then that means, then how can these things be true? How can you feel these things if there's no God, there's no higher purpose, and there's nothing? So that's my answer. We all feel so. And last year, I was telling the story for Ne'ilah. My father had a story where one of his colleagues, what was that? One of his colleagues was telling him he was in Egypt, and there were all of a sudden he knew it was Yom Kippur, he knew it was the Day of Atonement, right? He was a priest. And he said, all of a sudden these boys were on vacation, came up to him and said, "Excuse me," he says, "we know you're a priest, you're not Jewish, but could you help us pray for a few minutes? We came away on vacation, but we know it's Yom Kippur, we know we want to do something." And I was telling over that story that the Shamas were leaning out, and I said the words, I said, "Wouldn't surprise me if you had people coming here to our shul," and it did. And caused a bit of a problem with security. We won't get into that now. And I said, "Let them in." And we're about 30 minutes before the end of Yom Kippur. There was about 3 guys came. They were Israeli boys. They came. Didn't come the whole Rosh Hashanah. Didn't come Yom Kippur, right? And people are like, "Who's coming then Yom Kippur?" It was a security risk. I always say to people, you got to talk to people. Right? You see people, you think it's scary. Okay, maybe it is. So talk to them. If you would have talked to them like I did, they would have said, "Yeah, we're Jewish, we're Israeli, we want to." So you would have known. Right? Okay. Right? Like in England, the security guards used to ask people, "Can you say the Shema?" If you have somebody you're not sure, I always find it, I'm not saying I'm not having security, that's not what I'm saying. I always find it's a bit pointless sometimes having security here, because the guy doesn't know who Jews are. Okay, if there's chas v'shalom, something goes wrong, somebody comes, yes, they're good, right? But for letting people in, they don't know, they're not letting anybody in, right? So I say, speak to them. Are you coming? It's Rosh Hashanah. If they know what they're talking about, right? they have the knowledge, they have the language, okay, so you let them in, right? Exactly, they know. And these boys, they came, 3 guys, they came the last 15 minutes, right? The Neshamas, they said, "Yeah, we wanted to come the end of Yom Kippur, say Shema," and then they danced afterwards. We did a dance, and they were dancing the most Labor Day dancing ever, and then they were gone, never seen them again, right? So the Neshamas felt something. So that's how I say that God exists. I feel it, I know it, right? As we feel at the end of Yom Kippur. So we're about to start this time. It's so real, it's so special, and so on, right? And it's real, and the world is in a difficult state, and we know all the problems that there is. All of this is going to be decided every year, right? And we can only look back. We look back and we say, okay, so last year everyone was so worried, "Oh, don't touch Iran. Iran will destroy the whole world." And what did Hashem say? Yes, get rid of Iran, right? Get rid of the nuclear program. Was it 13 days, right? Who would have believed such a thing last year, right? Baruch Hashem, yes, a few people lost their lives and a lot of buildings, but on the scale of what people thought would happen, I mean, it was hardly anything. So that's a bit of inspiration I wanted to share for Yom Kippur. Okay, so as I say, Parshas Ki Tetsei has the most mitzvos in the Torah. 74 mitzvos are mentioned in this week's Parsha, and a lot of them are mitzvahs that we have to do. A lot of them are mitzvahs that you only do if a situation arises, such as if you see a bird's nest and you want to take the bird. So that's not a mitzvah you have to go out of your way and do, right? If you see a bird, you want the bird, you take it away, right? So there's certain mitzvahs that are called chiyuvim, you have to do. And there's certain mitzvahs that if the situation arises, you have an opportunity, right? Like same with Hashavas Aveda. If you see something on the floor, then all of a sudden you have to now decide, right, I've got a mitzvah to do, right? Shabbos, you have to keep Shabbos. Kosher, you have to eat kosher. But there's certain mitzvahs they're not optional mitzvahs, but they only apply in certain circumstances. And I wrote about in my message for this week, the end of the parasha, there was a few mitzvahs about allowing people to eat from your stuff. So if you have a worker who's working in your vineyard, you have to let him eat the grapes. But it says, well, you can't put them in his basket and take them home, but he's allowed to eat while he's there. And there's other mitzvahs. You have somebody in the vineyard, he's allowed to eat. and various other mitzvahs in this week's Parsha along the similar theme. And the Gemara also says that if you're having a shamas, a waiter, at your food table, you have to allow him to eat. You have to give him to eat, and so on and so forth. And I was thinking, because somebody told me this a few years ago, many years ago, and I really was like, wow. Somebody said, he said, when I have my cleaner in my house, I turn the air conditioning off. I said, what? He said, he said, I don't have the AC on for my cleaning lady. I said, really? I said, so you let her clean in the stifling house? He goes, yeah, well, I'm not keeping my AC on, paying AC for. And I thought, no. That's the end of this week's Parsha. It's the same idea. If somebody's cleaning your house.
We actually lower it.
Right.
When they come here.
Right. It's exactly. Exactly.
We turn it on.
It's the same idea. It may not be the exact idea, but it's the same what Hashem is trying to impart upon you, right? You bring someone over to your house. You give them food. You get, like when I have people, like guys cut my trees a few weeks ago, I gave them bottles of water, right? It's always good anyway, because then you can get them to do extra things. It's always good, right? If you're always nice to them and you treat them nice, they'll go out of their way to do something extra for you. If you're horrible to them, you scream and shout at everybody, then they won't go out of their way. But besides that, you'll be nice to people. People are working for you. Offer them a drink, a cold drink, and something. You know, it's in this week's Parsha, right? I used to say the same, about mashgichim in restaurants, whatever, and people say, so then some restaurants said, okay, Rabbi, we'll have a special menu. We can't expect the mashgichim necessarily, or the people working in the restaurant, to have the top menu item. Fine, I get that. I'm not saying have the best thing, but somebody's working in the restaurant for 12 hours, 10 hours, with the food all over them. It's got to give them something, So they made special menus for the, It's only, or you give them a what's the word, price off, what's it called, a discount or whatever. It's menschlichkeit. That's what the Torah is trying to teach you. That you should think about these things, think about other people, what do they need, and so on and so forth. And
respect what they do.
Exactly, respect what they do. But one of the mitzvahs I want to talk about today is a mitzvah that people don't like talking about, because it has negative connotations, and that's the mitzvah of divorce. That's the mitzvah of getting a get. Again, it's not a mitzvah you have to go out and do, but it's a mitzvah that if you decide that this is no longer working, which in itself is a lesson that we are never, we are never, we can always change, right? I know the Christians, they don't believe officially in divorce, right? You're stuck. Goodbye, you're stuck in whatever circumstance while you're stuck. No, we as Jews don't believe in that, right? It doesn't work out, okay, so you can change it. Okay? You're never stuck in a rut. You're never cursed, or whatever they believe in, right? You always have the ability. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about that why, because it's very important. And I'll explain to you why. So getting married is very easy. Halachically, very easy. Even if you mess up getting married, you mess it all up, we're not going into the rules of marriage now, but you're married, okay? So it's very easy to get married. It's very easy to mess up getting married, but you're still married. The fact that you're living with the woman, according to many, and that you're cohabitating, that's enough to okay. But getting divorced is exceedingly nuanced. I use that word nuanced because so on. And if you mess up getting divorced, you're still married. And that has huge connotations, because marrying a woman who's already married is a sin that carries kores. And not that I'm saying you should do certain sins or don't do other sins, but they use this level of penalty to see which is a more serious avera, right? So averas that carry no penalty are less than averas that carry lashes, and the lashes are less than the ones that have the death penalty. And kores is like the most serious, right? 36 sins that you get kores for, those are like the most serious, right? And one of those, of course, is marrying a woman who's already married. And of course, if you have children, the children are mamzerim, and now you've ruined and caused a huge problem for them and for descendants, and that's a big issue too. So here's where it comes very, very into play. So when I got married in England, we have records going back 350 years, and kasubas of everybody's on file. So obviously my wife was American, so they needed the American based in to get a certificate that my wife was Jewish, first of all. That's still valid. They're called Tudas Yadus, and a Tudas Ravkus, which means she's not married, which is obviously no longer valid, because the moment she married me, that was the end of that certificate, right? So therefore, and they had to go through all the testing and make sure that, the investigations and so on. I did a wedding a couple of years ago of a woman Now, I've done 3 weddings. Now, you know, a lot of today, it's all about reviews. You check out your reviews. You review your doctor. What's his reviews like? What's his stats, right? Sports players. Oh, what's their stats, right? So if you look at my stats for marrying, nobody would ever ask me to marry them. I married 3 people. 2 of them have ended up getting divorced. And one of them, I had to fight because the guy didn't want to give it a get, and it was a case of aguna, and it was terrible. But Baruch Hashem, we were able, and it was all to do with money, unfortunately, and so on and so forth. But Baruch Hashem, we were able, I also then got thrust into the middle of this, trying to sort it out and whatever. But we won't go into that now. So that was, had to put a lot of effort into that. Anyway, the second marriage that I did seemed innocuous enough. The woman said, yeah, I'm not married. I've been divorced for 30 years. 30 years. I said, aha, okay. Did you get a Jewish get? What's that?
Oh, really?
And they didn't. Okay. So I said, well, if you got married, even if it wasn't a halachic ceremony, they had a kid. So once you have a kid, it's much... Okay, so halachically you're married. I said, you can't marry this other guy now. And I expected, because this wasn't a religious lay, I said, okay, goodbye, get lost. We don't need a rabbi to marry as we'll do, as the people do. And and the husband was like, oh, no, or the future husband. The fiancé was like, no, I want to do it right, because it's scary, You may want to break Shabbos, do other things, but, marrying a woman who's going to be married, that's like okay. So then the fear of a get sets in. Why do I say the fear of a get? Because people don't know what it's about, right? You tell somebody you've got to get a get. You what? Got to get a get. And then the halacha is a get has to be done by a beis din. Oh, what? Me? I got to go to beis din? What? Right? A lot of fear. I would hazard a get. I stopped somebody going on a date, actually, a couple of years ago, because the woman says she didn't have a get. I said, wait a minute. She said, well, maybe by the time I'll get her to get a get. I said, maybe. I said, but the problem is you'll fall in love with this woman, because that's what always happens, right? The woman that you can marry, you don't fall in love with. Also, the forbidden woman, you'll fall head over heels in love with her. Then you'll be a problem, and then you'll be stuck, right? I remember our Rebbe Yeshiva used to say, once a person, this is about marrying a non-Jew, once a person is ready to get married to a non-Jew, and you tell them not to get married, it's very hard. I'm in love with this person. You tell me not to marry them. What's the thing? You've got to stop them getting to the point where they're in love, right? So you don't meet and going out. Okay. So I said, this is not a good idea. I said, make sure these people get a get first. Okay. So there's a fear of a get. So when I sat down with this woman and I explained, it's not very difficult. Okay. First of all, the beis din do all the work. And there's just a little few things for you to do, which I'm going to talk about. I explained it. So then the next issue was finding the husband. Right? That she hadn't spoken to for 20 years. Okay. But she had the daughter. They found the husband. We were able to speak to the rabbi and know what the husband does, and there's ways that he could get the permission. Right? And they got the get, no problem. Halachic get, we're able to get married. So there is this fear of a get because it has to be done in beis din, right? A marriage could be done anywhere. Okay, you get a rabbi come, you get us married, easy peasy. But again, go to beis din. It's frightening. Why? Because you think about going to court, right? That's what this woman said when we were going to beis din. I'm going to court, lawyers. I need this, I need that. I said no. I said, this is just a simple ceremony. It has to be done in a beis din. Okay. In the end, they did it in the middle of the street with the husband. They met at a gas station, which I'm going to explain. And a get is fascinating if you've ever been to see it and how it works, and never that we should have to do it for ourselves. So I wanted to talk about it. And if you know people, okay, even if they're not going out and dating other boys, other men, because even if you're 80, you're 90, doesn't matter. If you never got a get from a previous man, that's it, right? So you're in trouble. To encourage people, right, to get a get. It's not that complicated. It's not that difficult. I should have checked up. I think it's about $800 that the beis din in Boca charge. If I remember correctly, about $800. And obviously, if people can't afford it, then they can make arrangements, and they have each person pays half, 400. So it's not expensive, right? It's not an expensive thing. So what is it? So I wanted to say a little bit about it because there is this fear, there is this frightening thing. So if you look in the pasuk, it is in. Let's find it. Here we go. It's on page 1058. It's chapter 24, verse 1. Ki yakach ish isha uvala. If a man takes a woman and has relationships with her, this is where we know about marriage. The halachos of marriage are not mentioned in the Torah. We just have this idea. You take a woman and you you live with her. So that's why I say marriage is very easy to get married. Halachically, very easy to get married, but getting divorced is very difficult. Right? And one now get divorced. What do you have to do? Now listen carefully. V'chosav, he writes. So something's got to be written. Who writes it? The husband, right? We're following. V'chosav lo, he writes for her. Sefer Korisos, a book of cutting. V'nosan b'yada, and he puts it in her hand. V'shilcha mibeisa, and he sends it out from his house. So we see he has to write something to her, some sort of a book, and it's got to be Korisos. And then a few psukim later, we have it a second time, because if she gets remarried to a second man, or another man, she's no longer ever allowed to remarry the first husband. If you get divorced, you can always remarry. In fact, the Gemara says it's a mitzvah to remarry your first wife, as long as if the man's married, doesn't matter. But if the woman gets remarried, then no longer can she remarry the first husband. That's the pasuk in between. And again, if the second husband wants to get rid of her, the same thing. Or when the second man doesn't like her, he writes to her, Sefer Krisos, that he writes this book of Krisos, puts it in her hand, and gets rid of it. First thing to say is, it's got to be written, it's got to be he giving something to her, and sends her away. The second thing we have to say straight away is it says it twice in 3 pesukim. And we know that we have a rule. Whenever the Torah says something twice, especially within such a short frame, it's telling you, why am I writing it twice? To tell you this way and only this way. Now, getting married, there's many ways you can get married. You can give a woman a ring. You can give a woman a document, right? You can just cohabit with her. Kesef, Shtain, Kiddushin, right? So you might have thought, okay, so this is just one way of getting married. So I'll do another way. So the Torah says it twice in succession, in 3 pesukim, to tell you it's this way and only this way. So that's where it comes on the Torah. So basically like this. The husband has to write the get. The husband has to write the get, and then he has to give it to the woman in her hands and say goodbye. Right? Well, there's a bit more. Now, of course, most people today don't know how to write in Hebrew and stuff like that, right? You need a sofa, right? So, how do we get around that nowadays? We appoint the sofa as our agent, right? Because we know in Judaism, we have an expression, shlucho shel adam kamoso, right? That's how sometimes it works in davening. You can't daven if you can't make a bracha, you have dollar, kiddush. I am doing it on your behalf. And according to some people, the mechanics works is when I'm saying kiddush for you, it's as if your mouth is saying the words. That's how some Rishonim explain it. It's as if you are literally doing it, right? So we have this idea that you can be my representative. So that's what happens. The husband appoints the shliach to write the get. The shliach, the sofa then writes the get. The husband comes back, and then he takes the get, and he then gives it to the woman. Again, sometimes the woman doesn't want to be there. I don't want to see this man, right? Oh, I hate him. So again, you can do a shliach, right? Where the husband will say to somebody, I am now appointing you on my behalf to give this get to my wife. Okay? So he doesn't have to be there at the time. So again, that's how the most time of the get is the writing of the get. Now, some sofrim are faster than others, right? In Eretz Yisrael, there's this guy that they do Gittin all day. You can write a get in like 40 minutes. A get is 12 lines. The easy way to remember what's the gematria of get? Gimel test. 3 and 9 is 12. So you have 12 lines. Here's the book on Gittin. And they have a copy of the get here, right? The wording that they use, they put the name, all the names of the person, nicknames of the person. That's why spelling of the names is very difficult. That's why you have a whole book of names, how to spell names. And when you come up with strange English American names, how do you spell it? So my father used to do a lot of Gittin for the Manchester Basin until his cousin got on the Basin, and you can't have a cousin. So, and my dad, he was the expert at spelling names. That was his thing. He would know how to spell names. So that's what I liked him. So basically, you come, it takes a few minutes, not long. The husband and based in, and they say, you want to give a get? Yes, I want to give a get. who's your wife? Say the name, right? Obviously, all the details are done beforehand so they know, but you still have to go through it. And he says yes. Now you say, right, can you write the get? No. Oh, okay, you want to appoint him, you appoint him. Now you also have to own it. So you take all the utensils, the pen, the ink, right? Let's say it's half an hour, 20 minutes. Okay, so the husband is there 20 minutes. Then they write the get. Okay, anywhere from 45 minutes to 2 hours, let's say 2 hours. Okay, then if the husband wants to do it, he can come back again, give the get. Now they read the get 2 or 3 times because, we read the get and they read it again and then okay. But then you get the get, the husband, the sofa, right, gives the get to the husband, and then he gives it to the woman, and the woman takes it in her hand. You say this one, this is your get, and now you're free to marry, you're free to any man. Goodbye. Not a long ceremony, not a difficult ceremony. In this case that I had here, so the husband was miles away. So they got the local rabbi, they met him in a gas station. The rabbi from the local city there, because he wasn't in a Jewish place, he took 2 other witnesses, because you have to obviously have the witnesses. He met him in a gas station. That's what it was. They met him in a gas station. He sat there, they said, right, went through this whole ceremony. You want to give me out, who's your wife, you do this, yeah? Will you appoint the sofa, right? And again, it's all complicated with the exact stuff. We're not going into all the minutiae of the details, right? He appointed him. Great. So he did his bit. He goes on with his life, maybe 20 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, that's it. Those people came back. They then appointed other shlichim in Florida, right? The sofa wrote the get. Then they called in the woman. And they got the shliach that the guy made, because he said, you sofa write the get, and I'm appointing you as the shliach to now give over the get, and you can appoint any other shliach that you want. And they sometimes send a get, obviously, in the mail as well. Sometimes, if you're writing get here and the person's in Eretz Yisrael, so you can send it in the mail. I mean, there's many different halachas that go into it, but this is the basic of it. Okay, the woman comes. Okay, we've got your get. Come. Also, maybe 20 minutes. Get the get, and that is it. It's not difficult. Okay, for the dayanim, they got to know what they're doing, right? There's a lot of stuff that goes in. You got to spell the names correctly. You got to write the right names. Can't be anything possible in the get. You got to do it the right way. We do it all. We read the get like 3 times, and each of the Eidim read the get, and then the husband reads the get, and then the sofa reads the get again, and then they have to put marks in the get because the get has to be written for the guy. So there's many details and minutiae. We're not going into that now, but I just wanted to go through the basics because it's not long, and it's not difficult, and it can even be done in weird places. Now the get is written in a proper place, in a base, and it's usually but it can be done, and it's not that difficult, and it's not that frightening, and it's not that, something that you have to have lawyers and go to base. I said, lawyers, and
it shouldn't be avoided.
Right, if you're talking about getting divorced in the moment and you have children, you have money, that's obviously something that's, needs to be sorted out, but that's not a base din to sort out. Okay, you can use based in. I know the based in here in Florida, they all have, what do they call them? Mediators that will work on your behalf. But most people end up with some sort of court documents or whatever. You sort it all out legally and whatever. And then you come to based in for the halachic side of, having a civil divorce. And this is where people make mistakes. Civil divorce means absolutely nothing. You can have a civil divorce and you're still halachically married, and all the mitzvahs of marriage and the averos of going out and marrying somebody else apply. So, if you know of people, that have been divorced civilly, and obviously once the husband dies, even many years later, then there's no need for a get anymore, right? So let's say they're divorced for 20 years, and then the husband died, then they don't need to get anymore, because now they're, So it's important. And that's why rabbis, when you come to say the rabbi, right, we want to get married, okay? Now, when you come to a wedding, and you come all dressed up nice to the wedding, you think that's the wedding. That's not, that is the wedding. That's the easy bit, right? Anyone can do that, right? You can say, oh, Rabbi here, you want to be the Masada Kedushin, do 10 minutes, right? It's all done. Oh, that's the easy bit. But there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. And I'm not talking about the caterer. And I'm not talking about anything else. I'm talking about to ascertain that these 2 people are halachically acceptable to get married. And it's getting harder and harder and harder. Why? Because you have all sorts of details like this. So now somebody got married, didn't have a get, so the children are now mamzerim. Whoops. So if they're mamzerim, that's a problem, obviously, because you can't marry a mamzer unless you are a mamzeris yourself, right? So now that becomes, people think a mamzer is an affair. Ooh, she has an affair. Yeah, that's easy. You had an affair, we know. Well, actually, maybe a lot of people don't know they have affairs and the children are not really. Well, you know what I mean, right? That's what people think. People don't think, right, that they got a civil divorce, they patched up their differences, and 10 years later they got married to a completely innocent man, thinking everything was fine and had a child. People don't think that that child's a mamzer. What do you do? I didn't have an affair. I didn't commit adultery. What are you talking about? But did you have a get? No. Oop, husband still alive? Yeah. Problem. Right? So you have a lot of that going around. A lot of that goes around. Okay? Big problem.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have the whole Jewish side of things, right? There's a lot of people who are not really Jewish, and then conversions through all sorts of rabbis that have a problem. So it is getting more. This is even without the Kohanes and the Kohanes can marry and all this sort of stuff, right? Leaving all that aside, because that can get quite complicated. People fall out with their rabbis over marriage. It's a well-known thing, right? That you won't marry me. All right, I'll go to the conservative, I'll go to the reform, that's it, goodbye, right? So even aside to come, that's the work that needs to be done before the wedding, is you need to ascertain that the two people who are going to stand under the chuppah are halachically allowed to get married. Halachically compatible, right? This is even before we get to the niddah and going to the mikveh. We were discussing before about England and stuff. England, everyone goes to the mikveh, right? You go to the rabbi, whether they go to the mikveh after marriage, that's, but they go to the mikveh before, right? They meet with the rabbi and the rebbitzin and they talk, right? And remember, always, have a couple of lessons. You go to the mikveh, and always the women, when they got married, they'd been to the mikveh at least once. Well, once, and what they do afterwards, that's, but at least when they get into the chuppah the first time, they've been to. I know that Moshe Feinstein has a whole tshuva about kind of Orthodox rabbi officiate at a marriage of people he know they've not been to the mikvah. Of course, he wouldn't officiate at a marriage of somebody that's a mamzer or somebody that's whatever, because that's halachically forbidden, right? The question is, what about a niddah? Because you can have, according to most opinions, if the kala is a niddah, it happens. It can happen, right? You do all your best to plan it and all the drugs or whatever pills that you take, but it could happen that the woman becomes a niddah and at the wedding, so you don't have to postpone the wedding, because according to most opinions, the wedding does take place. You can't consummate the wedding, and it can get very embarrassing because they can't really do yichud together, and they can't live together in the same house without a shoma, so it can be very embarrassing if you say, we need somebody to sleep in the same house, or, oh yes, we're going, but we're going to separate hotel rooms, right? It can be very embarrassing, but so it's not, right? And then pictures could be difficult, right? Okay, so it's not a good thing to have, okay? But since most halakhic authorities say that a chuppahs niddah is acceptable, then the answer is it is acceptable, so can a rabbi do it? And so on. But I just wanted to give a little flavor of what goes into a marriage and so on. And really, you could do a huge mitzvah if you know of people, friends, family. And it's a hard discussion to have, don't get me wrong. Even when I sat down with this woman, the first was like, I've been divorced for 25 years, she tells me. I said, wait a minute, So it's a difficult discussion. And I'm not saying going guns blazing, but there should be more awareness.
Yeah.
More awareness of, right, exactly, of people who are dating, who are thinking that they are legitimately acceptable to get married, that they're, and then for people who are on these apps, the men, right, because if a man has not got a get, halachically, he can get married to as many women as you want, right? We don't do that nowadays, and I'm not saying it's acceptable, but it's not the end of the world if a man hasn't got a get, and he's technically still married, and he marries another woman. The children are not mamzerim, and halachically it's acceptable. At Torah, certainly. If you knew the man wasn't married, you wouldn't do the wedding without him getting a get, because we would still make sure that he gets a get, whatever. Right. But it's not as serious if it turns out, So for all these men that are on these dating apps, the Jewish dating apps, right? It's important to know. I don't know, because I did a lot of dating apps, but I haven't been on them since before I got married. But I wonder if that's a question they ask. I wonder, for people who have been married before, do you have a get? I wonder if that's a question that some of these I'm sure that some of the religious dating apps must have that on. Sure. But it's just something to be aware of. Okay, so we'll leave it there. If anybody has any questions, I'll say goodbye. I apologize to everybody who's watching. It seems that half my face is cut off. I don't know if it's just my iPad or if it's... so I apologize for that. Okay, have a good week, everybody. Okay.
2 questions.